Chapter 5. Dorian watched, unfeeling, as scarlet acrobats tumbled through the air to merry applause. Silk and lace musicians played their violins, flutes and harpsichord before the tarnished floor-to-ceiling mirror that tricked the eye into thinking the banquet hall was even larger. Dorian had adored parties since boyhood, but tonight he felt like a guest at a wedding feast for a couple he hated. His heart's desire was the vial of poison in his room. Soon, he told himself, as the glass court whirled, gorged and sloshed their way through the gala. Soon, he would find peace in death. Dorian and Philippe lorded over everyone from the dais. Dorian veiled, and Philippe obstinately unveiled. The highborns could never resist flaunting their status in a game of who sits closest to the royals, Clovis's favourite game, since he usually won. The golden baldaquin tablecloth was laden with delicacies of the highest order, featuring the usual roasted swan, and, of course, peacock, for the royals and their special guests. Colourful banners of House Sinclair's family tree hung at eye level, blazoning Philippe's relation to Dorian. Dorian had emphasised his ties to obscurer relatives, hoping one more unfamiliar name would go unnoticed. The boy himself, man himself, swept the scene with a consciously bored gaze, fighting to appear unenchanted, but his gaze was soon taken by the festivities of Mount Olympus, painted on the ceiling. A familiar laugh alerted Dorian to the dance floor, a laugh like spring in winter. His own cackle used to accompany it when they were children, but now his stomach just churned, like she'd sent her butterflies on him. Swathed in sky blue, giddy cousin Moira goaded Elizabeth into spinning hand in hand, far too fast for the song. For a woman of 20, she had the spirit of a child. Her laurel wreath slipped to the floor when she fell against Elizabeth with dizzied laughter, mouthing, "No more, no more, I feel sick." Those eyes, two bits of hardened amber, pinpointed Dorian through tentacles of brown hair. Her smile took on a puckish cheek. Mimicking him, she flourished her wrist and bowed his way. Dorian looked away, conscious of Philippe's cold blues chilling him from the throne chair at his right. "Your cousin, I presume?" Philippe indicated Moira with a steady nod. She playfully returned the wreath to her head, as though crowning herself queen of the dance floor. Dorian twisted his blue diamond earring. "Blood alone unites us." "She's fetching. For a witch?" It was an understatement, really, though not wholly indebted to genes. Her role in the cult, the family, had 3 requirements for the care of her body: health, beauty, and virginity. Thus, Moira's fairness of form was unnaturally enhanced. Her ivory skin, her bright eyes, her silken hair, her plump lips, it had all been treated. "Did you envision her hunched and gnarled beyond her years?" Dorian retorted. He didn't know why he defended her. Old habits die hard, he supposed. "You should know that 2 months ago, with the death of her stepmother, Moira became the wealthiest woman in all of Ravensdale. Aunt Verona named her sole heir to 2 duchies left behind by Moira's father and one of her half-brothers, Dominic. That woman is a gold mine, which only makes her all the more dangerous." He looked sidelong at Philippe, who sipped wine under his veil. "So don't waste your time. on idle fantasies. Philippe's smirk was sharp like the silverware. My fantasies are never idle, he said in that rough voice he wielded so smoothly. They always have a calculated purpose for future merit. Taking up his sapphire-crusted chalice, he moved on before Dorian could object again. Is Elizabeth a relation of hers? Dorian sighed boredly. Godmother and governess to Moira and I. Occasional tutor. Of course, Moira's cult cares little for her brain. Oft she was forced to self-educate. Elizabeth is what their cult calls a breeder, designated for pumping out mindless devotees. Her family rivals a hare's. Not that many people believe it. I know only through Moira, and she rarely speaks of what goes on in the family. Humming in response, Philippe looked at a gaggle of counsellors, who averted their eyes once they caught his. I've noticed a lack of, shall we say, economic diversity among the guests. Would it not be wiser to ring in my kingship with both the upper and lower classes, to demonstrate I will oppose prejudice during my reign? Dorian rolled his head over his shoulders toward him. Oppose prejudice? This is Ravensdale. Prejudice is our staple. It's to us what romance is to the French. The separation between classes keeps people in place. Take it away and what are we? Unified. Philippe twisted his wineglass by the stem, oblivious to the curiosity in Dorian's gaze, brought on by his response. Is this unbreakable, like most of our glass? Somewhat. Meaning? Clovis leaned over Dorian from his seat to address Philippe. Dorian watched his hair graze the meat pie. We're collapsing into bankruptcy. We cannot afford to instill every glass object with an equal serving of forest stone. That's the mineral which makes our glass so unique. Philippe smiled politely, dually tolerant and intolerant. I know what it is, Monsieur de la Fontaine. Clovis deliberated between two scones. Pardon-moi, but you do look like quite the colt. Then you would be surprised just how well I keep up with stallions. To clarify, then, in our monetary crisis, once our supply of forest stone tapped out, Dorian just resorted to smuggling the mineral from Ireland's waters. He popped a raspberry in his mouth. Precisely. Lucky bastards don't know they own a pot of gold in the deep blue. We'd like to keep it that way. God forbid we ever fall out with the leprechauns. If he doesn't forbid, we do deserve it. The way Philippe sighed backward into his chair, a fist going to his chin, had the familiar air of, I have so much work to do, and I don't know where to start. I feel Ravensdale has invested too much in its glass trade. Other countries have added to the world, whether it be art or politics, social practices or moral values, but Ravensdale is nothing more than the cultural love child of France and England. Oh, was the implied scoff in Clovis's head tilt. He crossed his turquoise silk legs. This coming from a man named Philippe Sinclair. Have you any idea how French that is? This coming from a man named Clovis de la Fontaine. Touché. Was that intentional? Surprisingly, no. Their stare didn't last long before Philippe broke it by a chuckle, which Clovis drowned out with his own full-on laugh, clapping him on the arm. Territorial fox though he was, it was plain Clovis found Philippe's frankness fresh enough to be entertaining, almost endearing. That was good. A man clever as Clovis could be any regent's unlikely undoing. A rush of impatient feelings showed themselves in Dorian's groaning sigh. His fingers were in fists under the table to avoid nail-biting. He'd reached his capacity for empty discussion. His work was finished, with Philippe set to be crowned and a conscience to guide him. Dorian had done his all to bequeath the kingdom to safe hands. His presence was now redundant, and that just wouldn't do. Discarding his napkin, he rose. "I'm retiring, Clovis. Lord Philippe may oversee the celebration in my stead." Clovis's smile closed like a laced fan. "It's terribly early, sire. We haven't even begun our party games. Begin without me." Hands reappearing from the white fur fringe of his mantle, Philippe gripped the gold leaf arms of his chair to rise. "I'm afraid I don't have much mind for games myself. It was a pleasure, Monsieur. And that pleasure will continue these next hours," Dorian said strictly. "If you want to romance the crown, you must woo the court. You have to be here to start this dance off on the right foot." "I prefer a more leisurely courtship," Philippe argued in an uncommitted crouch, half risen from his seat. "There are still matters of state I wish to refresh my memory on. I need you for that." "Impossible. I will be unavailable." "Until when?" "Starting to leave." The question made Dorian flinch to a stop like he'd walked into a wall. "Until never. After tonight there would be no when." "Philippe, a first impression cannot be repeated. Tonight these aren't your subjects, they're your guests. You are not their king, you are their entertainer, which means you must be seen." Philippe saw that same gaggle of counsellors from before. This time he was the one to falter, head shrinking down a bit as he absorbed the level of command dropped into his possession. "I am not entertaining. If I doubted your abilities, I wouldn't have chosen you. You have many virtues to rely on. Your wit, your rhetoric, your maturity. And in the end, it's just bread and circuses." Easy for the circus master to say. It was a play for humour, but the way his smile fell at the end only pulled out Dorian's sympathy. At a loss for words of comfort, Dorian slowly turned and made to leave. Philippe stopped him with yet another question. "Why did you choose me?" It was a question he had often asked himself, since they'd met in the woods early March, when by chance both had gone for rides, and Philippe's horse had run off without him. It wasn't his brain or his quick tongue which had captivated Dorian. Without facing him, Dorian said the words as he himself realised them. "I chose you because you have what the rest of them lack. Humanity." And without further ado, he left the Bronze Hall for the last time. Chapter 6. Tonight he would follow the Romans and fall on his sword. Suicide was actually quite brave of him, a self-sacrifice to spare others the burden of his existence. This was the path of warriors, not cowards. Why then did he feel he must dress it up as a murder? Dorian shoved into his parlour and kicked the door shut, ripping his azure veil from his head. He pushed air from his lungs and faced the parlour through sweat-slick curls. Percy's drugs still laced the air, a cruel reminder of the friends he would leave behind. There was a glass dining table which had known few guests. He told himself this was because he preferred solitude, but solitude had brought him here. Here, like many of his rooms, the walls were dressed in a damask turquoise wallpaper, trimmed with the gaudiest of golds. He'd always liked that, far cheerier than the sobriety of his father's abode, but he'd find no cheer where he was bound. Bad luck to be first to leave a party. Dorian jumped at the intrusion. Killian sat in the same chair as earlier, like he'd never left, with City of God open in his lap, wearing a black velvet frock coat for the party he'd skipped out on. Dorian swished his hair from view and pocketed his veil. "Still refuse to call me your lord?" Killian faintly smiled. "Still refuse me my calling?" It was a running joke of theirs that Killian had but one lord, and wouldn't address Dorian by a title he reserved for God, since it was by Dorian's command that he was here at all, when his first love was the priesthood. "What are you doing here?" "Peacocks of a feather flock together," Killian said with a dash of half-sincere contempt for his friends. "I identify more with a socially misfitted quail who prefers an early night." Dorian pinched himself between the eyes. "Be that as it may, I will not be good company now. You may go. Is everything all right?" "Oh, for heaven's sakes, go away!" Killian rose as bidden, sighing over Dorian's mood. Eyeing him funny, he bent into a short bow. "Send for me, if you need anything. I am never far." He left for the hall. Dorian almost called him back. Almost. Entering his bedchamber, he closed the door with his back. There was his magnificent four-poster, which had known many sleepless nights. The lounges at the fireplace lay vacant. There, on the shallow glass table, was a tiny replica of the astronomical clock in Prague, a gift from the King of France, probably worth more than he was. Back against the wood, Dorian slid to the floor, breathing heavier and heavier. What did it all amount to? The imported oak table couldn't laugh with him. Brocade curtains couldn't share his secrets. His Venetian mirror never lifted him up. It simply reflected the only person he had to turn to. If he shouted loud enough, he could make an echo. But who would listen? His whole body was quivering. As he held his head, tears pushed from his clenched eyes. His mind was of ravens and crows, of the death omens he'd so long avoided. Years running from death. And now here he was, arranging the meeting. His family's motto beckoned from the limestone mantel across the room, where the Sinclair's raven coat of arms stared down in condemnation. He knew its slogan all too well. No room for the weak. He beat his head against the wall, biting down on his lip against a sob. No room for Carnell's one regret. The blackened stain on the family line. The lifeless inertia of the past years had entangled him between a state of living and dying. Life had proved death-like. Maybe death would prove lifelike. No room for the weak. And the weak meant him. Dragging his sleeve across his nose, he picked himself off the floor. As he poured himself a glass of wine, it splashed onto the table. He dabbed it up. It couldn't look like a mess. It would be murder at someone else's hand, not his own. He wouldn't let them think they'd broken him. The vial of poison was where he'd left it, in the hidden compartment atop his mantle. He drained the liquefied killer into his cup. Clutching the glass, his gaze wandered to the desk in the corner, to that charming writing desk, with a great seahorse carved into the side, as its owner had requested years ago. Here, Ghost had burnt the midnight oil, scrawling away into the wee hours while Dorian whined for attention. Ghost would pretend not to hear him, though he could never hide the shadow of a smirk. Dorian lowered into the chair. A lump built up in his throat at the onrush of memories. Everything had unravelled so fast, and he would never have the chance to explain to what had led him here. The fire was burning out. He needed to be dead by morning. Dorian raised his glass in a toast with a great sniff. To death, my greatest adversary, and my singular consolation. Santé. And with the breath of one ready to drown, he drank. Now came an end to his bloody reign. Now came victory through failure. As he sank back, his eyes roamed the desk. The pen. His heart splintered when he spotted a familiar swan feather quill. It wasn't his. It wasn't Clovis's either, although he made regular use of it. He knew very well whose it was. Someone who would be gutted to learn of his fate, if indeed he was still alive. He touched the feathers as hot, angry tears seared down his cheeks. Angry at himself. Angry at the world. Poor Ghost. Poor, dear Ghost. Would he ever forgive him? He hoped so. Yes, he hoped Ghost would forgive him, because he never would. Vision blurring, Dorian collapsed onto the floor with a terrible thud. As he took a shuddering breath, a voice crooned into his consciousness. The voice of someone nearby. Humming. No. Singing. Ba ba black sheep, have you any wool? Yes sir, 3 bags full. 1 for my master, 1 for my dame, 1 for the little boy who lives down the lane. Was this the madness of hell opening up to him? In the dim of his mind, a shadow passed over him, sideways from his lopsided head, and 2 curly-toed slippers stepped into view, like a fairy tale creature who'd popped out of its book, coloured in golds and silvers, but spoiled by splotches of mismatched paint in green, blue, yellow, orange. The world was swallowed by a mouth of darkness. Ba ba black sheep, have you any wool? Yes sir, 3 bags full. Dorian had hoped there was no life after death. It was life. He wanted to escape.